All right, welcome to Movie-holics Anonymous. Let's begin with our names.
I'm Sam.
I'm Mycah.
Consuela.
Sí.
Okay, I think we all know why we're here. We have an unhealthy obsession with motion pictures and the movies. So let's begin talking about how they began. So first off, it all started with...
To start off, in the 1800s, many toys were developed that were based on the quirks of the human perceptual system, the phi phenomenon and persistence of vision. Both of these principles allow us to perceive a series of pictures to be moving. Many early toys to utilize these conventions include the thaumatrope, phanatoscope, and the kinematoscope, to name a few. Thomas Edison took this principle a step further to develop a machine called the kinetoscope. Edison and his assistant William Dixon made this device based upon the studies and advancements made by a photographer named Edward Muybridge. Muybridge settled a $25,000 bet whether the 4 feet of a galloping horse ever simultaneously left the ground. By setting up 24 cameras along the track, he settled the bet and laid the groundwork for motion pictures. Edison is often given credit for creating the first film. In fact, he was responsible for the first patenting of a motion picture. Fred Ott Sneeze was just a 4-second motion picture of one of Edison's mechanics that could humorously sneeze on command. Edison laid the path for many early motion pictures to take hold. Starting with Nickelodeon's, motion pictures started to spread worldwide. Soon small theaters were established and the artistic visions of many were told through this new technology. Some notable figures in the early film industry include the Lumiere brothers, who patented their own working projector and showed footage of everyday events, and George Méliès, the man behind the first sci-fi film, A Trip to the Moon, in 1902. In 1903, another notable film, The Great Train Robbery, laid the groundwork for the genre of westerns. Soon, films were becoming longer and had a larger budget. Many Hollywood icons got their fame during this time, including Charlie Chaplin. Soon, filmmakers adopted the star system as one of the ways to battle the motion picture's patents company. Hollywood studios began to spring up, such as MGM and Universal. Films continued to flourish and shape society. In 1915, D.W. Griffith released his 190-minute film, The Birth of a Nation, that followed the triumphs of a Southern white Klansman driving out African Americans from their town. As can be predicted, this film still remains to be one of the most controversial films in history. With advancements in sound recording, talkies were born, the first of which was The Jazz Singer, released in April 1927. Once again, the face of motion pictures was changed.
Okay, Sam, so why don't you start by telling us a little bit more about your movie addiction?
Sure thing, Mr. Paul. I personally have always had a love for the classics.
The 1930s decade was also the decade of sound and color revolutions and the advance of the talkies and the further development of film genres, gangster films, musicals, newspaper reporting films, historical biopics, social realism films, lighthearted screwball comedies, westerns, and horror, to name a few. It was the era in which the silent period ended, with many silent film stars not making the transition to sound. By 1933, the economic effects of the Depression were being strongly felt, especially in decreased movie theater attendance. The early years of the 1940s decade were not promising for the American film industry, especially following the late 1941 attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. The 1950s decade was known for many things: post-war affluence and increased choice of leisure time activities, the advent of television and TV dinners, the rise of drive-in theaters to a peak number in the late 1950s with over 4,000 outdoor screens where young teenage couples could find privacy in their hot rods, and a youth reaction to middle-age cinema. Older viewers were prone to stay at home and watch television. About 10.5 million U.S. homes had a TV set in 1950. In the period following World War II, when most of the films were idealized with conventional portrayals of men and women, young people wanted new and exciting symbols of rebellion. Hollywood responded to audience demands. The late 1940s and 50s saw the rise of the anti-hero, with stars like newcomers James Dean, Paul Newman, and Marlon Branson. Sexy anti-heroines included Ava Gardner, Kim Novak, and Marilyn Monroe, an exciting, vibrant, sexy star. Cinema in the 1960s reflected the decade of fun, fashion, rock and roll, and tremendous social changes.
All right, well, thanks for sharing that with us. Okay, Mike, how about you? What's your movie addiction?
I'm more of a retro kind of movie fanatic.
Increasingly in the 60s, the major studios financed and distributed independently produced domestic pictures, and made-for-TV movies became a regular feature of network programming by mid-decade. Many runaway film productions were being made abroad to save money. By mid-decade, the average ticket price was less than $1, and the average film budget was slightly over $1.5 million. And by the end of the decade, the film industry was very troubled and depressed, and experiencing an all-time low that had been developing for almost 25 years. Due to various insecurities and financial difficulties, the studios were quickly taken over by multinational companies. The traditional Hollywood studio era would soon be history as more and more studios were acquired by other unrelated business conglomerates. The age of packaged films and the independent company and producer were beginning. The so-called Renaissance of Hollywood was built upon perfecting some of the traditional film genres of Hollywood's successful past, with bigger blockbuster dimension. Oftentimes, studios would invest heavily in only a handful of bankrolled films, hoping that one or two would succeed profitably. In the 70s, the once powerful MGM Studios sold off many of its assets, abandoning the filmmaking business and diversified into other areas, mostly hotels and casinos. Much of the focus was on box office receipts and the production of action and youth-oriented blockbuster films with dazzling special effects, but it was becoming increasingly more difficult to predict what would sell or become a hit. Hollywood's economic crises in the 1950s and 60s, especially during the war against the lure of television, were somewhat eased with the emergence in the 70s of summer blockbuster movies or event films, marked to mass audiences, especially following the awesome success of two influential films, Star Wars and Jaws.
I love you.
I know.
The decade of the 1980s tended to consolidate the gains made in the 70s rather than to initiate any new trends equal to the large number of disaster movies, buddy movies, or rogue cop movies that characterized the previous decade. Designed and packaged for mass audience appeal, few 80s films would be called classics. Cable TV networks, direct broadcast satellites, and half-inch video cassettes in the VHS format in the 80s encouraged broader distribution of films. Sales and revenues from pre-sold theatrical features for videocassette reproduction and cable TV distribution contributed increased percentages for studios' earnings, sometimes outpacing box office profits.
The 70s takes me back. Good times. Anyway, Consuela. I guess we could talk about your movie addiction now.
Well, Sir Polly, I'm more of a modern film buff.
A lot has changed in motion pictures over the last 20 years. The cinema saw a boom in attendance during the 1990s, partly due to cheaper ticket prices that averages at around $4.25 at the start of the decade. Films still carried with them a heavy cost, with around $100 million per film being the norm. With the use of CGI coming into play, like in Jurassic Park and Star Wars Episode 1, movies looked better than ever. The VCR was still a popular medium of the day, and in 1997 the first DVDs began to roll out onto the market. The power of internet and film promotion was also realized in a big way with 1999's Blair Witch Project. Millions logged onto its official website, and the amateur-looking film made $249 million worldwide. That's impressive considering it had no major stars or special effects. Some of the biggest movies during the 90s included The Sixth Sense and The Lion King. Terrorist attacks, 2 wars, and the Great Recession saw moviegoers finding refuge in theaters during the 2000s. War movies such as In the Valley of Eli and Lions for Lambs did poorly in the box office as viewers were seeking release from the world around them. Movie theaters began using social marketing for film promotion during the new millennium and continued using the power of the internet. The 2000s in film was also powered by sequels. Harry Potter, Twilight, and Paranormal Activity sequels were all huge successes. Documentary films also hit it big, with films like Fahrenheit 9/11 and March of the Penguins. Pixar became a powerhouse in animation during the 2000s, with flicks like Monsters, Inc., Finding Nemo, and Up becoming fan favorites. But my favorite movie of the last 20 years would have to be Titanic.
Hello, Jack. They said you might be out here.
Give me your hand. Now come on up here. Now keep your eyes closed. Are they closed? Now look.
I'm flying, Jack.
I'm king of the world! Woo!
This James Cameron film was the highest grossing film of all time before Cameron's Avatar in 2009. The film has earned over $2 billion worldwide and is considered one of the greatest films of all time. In my opinion, it is the greatest film of all time.
Alright, those were all amazing stories. Thanks for sharing. Now I think maybe it'd be alright if we talked about the future movies. Now, calm down. It'll be under control. So, Sam, what do you think? What do you think, Samantha?
I personally would like to think that in the future, you'll be able to jump right into the screen and get swept off your feet, just like Brett Butler does with Scarlet and Gone with the Wind.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Okay, so Mycah, your opinion?
Well, now that Disney's bought out Star Wars, there'll be possibly 15 more sequels, and they'll all be dumb.
Unfortunately. Okay, Consuela.
Well, I think the movies will be a more immersive experience. And there'll actually be people that you can actually watch, and it'll be live, and you'll be drawn in more.
Those are all great opinions, but you're all wrong. TVs are just going to get thinner, and they're going to be selling 3D glasses and gimmicky crap. That's it. All right, meeting adjourned. Let's go. Woo!